And we should see, yeah, we already have like almost 20 people in the waiting room. And so they'll start to see the live stream. All right. This is my biggest kind of party of folks here. So I'm going out with a bang on Friday. I love it. All right. So according to my time, it's 12:30. So I'm going to say good afternoon and welcome everybody for day 5 of Wisconsin Salt Awareness Week. I'm Allison Madison with Wisconsin Saltwise, and I really want to thank all of you who are watching right now for helping to make this week such a great success. We've already had over 1,000 views of the webinars from Monday through Thursday, and that's thanks to you coming and watching and sharing those video links. And I just hope you continue to do that, and so we can just have a greater impact across the state. I also want to just say a huge thanks to all of the organizing partners who helped make this week possible. So we have Milwaukee Riverkeeper. Katie's here from Milwaukee Riverkeeper. She's been one of the great partners. I've also been able to work with Waukesha Parks, the Root Pike Watershed Initiative Network, the Fox Wolf Watershed Alliance, and the City of Superior, and a number of municipal partners. So there are a lot of amazing changes right now happening in the world of winter maintenance, but my perspective is that a lot of citizens don't realize what's going on kind of behind the scenes. Maybe they're starting to notice like brine, those lines going down on the streets before the storm, but there's just so much happening. And so today, I really am excited to be able to give a platform to the voices of a lot of folks who are making those changes happen. So we have Emil from Wisconsin DOT, Corey from the city of Eau Claire, Matt from Enviro Sealers, a private contractor, and then Katie from Milwaukee Riverkeeper, a nonprofit, obviously in the Milwaukee area. So each of them are going to tell their stories, how they're working to help protect our fresh water and the longevity of our infrastructure by working in salt conservation, salt reduction. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Emil to get us started with successes, next steps, and how we as citizens can help out.
All right. Thank you, Allison, for having me. So good afternoon, everyone. Before I share the success story in salt reduction from WisDOT's perspective, I would like to just mention that underlying any success that the department has had is the great partnership we have with the counties in maintaining our state highways, which is a nationwide unique arrangement that's been going on in our state for over a century now. So credit to the counties and their operational staff, as they're actually the ones who are out there fighting the winter storms and removing those snow and ice on the highways for all of us. So to get started, the WisDOT success in salt reduction can mostly be credited to the three steps. The first one is awareness. We became aware of the obviously environmental effects of salt when we realized that as much as salt has been the most effective materials to use for snow and ice control for several decades now, frankly, we have to admit that its usage hasn't been very responsible. And obviously that's not right for our environment. And we've heard all about it on the talks here on Monday and Tuesday from all the researchers and experts. So I'm not gonna repeat everything, but the other side of that is also we were also made aware of the economic effects of salt, with salt price increasing from under $30 a ton in 2000 to currently almost $82 a ton, and that's 173% in the past 20 years, way surpassing inflation rate. So clearly, from this point, it's also not something that's sustainable from the point of view of winter maintenance funding, if we don't do anything about it. So these two things triggered the awareness that our department started the salt reduction initiative, which started a few years ago, where we started focusing on finding ways to reduce our salt use while still maintaining the level of service that we have always provided and the traveling public have expected. So the second step is education and research. So we then started spreading these awareness to everyone. In this case, most importantly, the people in the counties, the patrol superintendents and the plow operators. So we visit the counties to provide information about the effects of salt and how we all need to do better, inform them about best practices in using salt, how to be more efficient. And then the counties took it to the next step with implementing trainings of their own, incorporating their salt management program, tracking their salt use for accountability, focusing on salt usage efficiency instead of just sheer volume. And again, we've heard about this on Monday as well when researchers were talking about alternative use. So, and that's the education part. The other part of this is the research aspect. So WSDOT is a founding member of the Clear Roads Group, which is a national group focused on testing of winter maintenance materials, equipment, and methods. Clear Roads consists of representatives from the 36 state transportation agencies from across the nation. So the group gather, share information, decide on topics to study, and then invite researchers to submit proposal that Clear Roads would then fund if accepted. WSDOT also has been collaborating with other researchers from right here in UW-Madison TOPS Lab. They have actually conducted a couple of winter maintenance studies for us. Most recently, have been focusing on the implementation of salt brine for winter maintenance. And this is a good segue for step number 3, which is our focus on increasing the use of salt brine for winter maintenance, which has been taking off in the state in the past 3 to 4 years. So we have started funding the counties to buy high capacity brine makers to help them with the process. We bought 17 high capacity brine makers in the first round, and then 11 more brine makers in fiscal year 21, and then another 12 in fiscal year 22. And so far, most of these brine makers are now in place at the counties and have been operational. In addition to some of the counties actually bought their own brine makers. And clearly usage of these brine makers have really improved throughout the years. And the result, which is coming next, has been great for reducing our salt use. So basically these 3 steps come together and are the reason really for our current success. And the success that I'm talking about, so basically we're just talking numbers, right? And our salt use per lane mile this year at 9.2 tons a lane mile is actually the lowest in the state of Wisconsin in 30 years. And that's a big deal. And remember that this is considering that our lane miles always increase throughout the years. And also that we are doing this focusing on salt reduction, but we are adamant about keeping our commitment and maintaining the same level of service that we've always provided. So I guess that's what I have for now, but I do have one thing here. There's the results from the UW-Madison TOPS Lab research study, and this is really fresh. The result just came out a couple weeks ago. They're basically saying that to introduce salt brine operation to existing granular salt operation, it conclusively indicate that it reduced the amount of salt used on average of 20%. But on average, with each county can reduce the amount of salt up to 40%. And even if you're looking at the very low level of certain storms, each usage, we can reduce salt use well over 50% using direct liquid application in brine. So I guess that's very encouraging. And again, if Allison was earlier talking about how we're looking in the future, well, we're going to keep doing this. We're going to keep getting more funds for more counties getting their own high capacity brine makers, and we're going to keep the education and research going on, and and also educating the public with social media so more people to realize that we are doing this, we are concerned about our environment, and we are getting better. So I guess that's it from me, Alice.
Thank you so much, Amo. And with that, we'll pass it off to Corey. If people have questions, you can start putting those in the chat. Corey, you're still muted right now.
I'm sorry.
There you go.
Good morning, or hello, everybody. My name is Corey Tietz with the City of Eau Claire Street Maintenance Division. City of Eau Claire's population about 69,000, so we're one of the top 10 largest cities in the state of Wisconsin. Annually, prior to any action, like has been already discussed with salt brine, that kind of stuff, our community used around 3 to 4,500 tons of salt every year. So pretty substantial cost, up to, in the range of $300,000 a year. On top of that, the impact that we were having to the environment by using that salt was pretty substantial. I think some of the biggest stuff for us that really brought us into looking at other alternatives to straight salt was programs like Wisconsin Saltwise, and participated in some other things like Rain to Rivers and that kind of thing that provide some very good data on saltwater runoff and concentrations in the water surrounding this area. And for us, those that don't know it, we have two predominant rivers that meet here in the community. So a lot of our runoff does end up in there. We wanted to look at ways that we could potentially help reduce those concentration rates that were. So then around, we started playing with salt brine here within the city in the winter of 2012, 2013. In 2018 and 19, we purchased our own salt brine maker here that we operate. Prior to that, we were piggybacking off of our local county and purchasing salt brine from them. This just offered us an opportunity to really expand our operations and start playing with different additives and stuff like that. So we were before, where we were using that 3 to 4,500 tons of salt. We're now down to an average of about 1,500 to 2,500 tons annually. So even though the amount of miles that we treat with straight salt has increased, we are actually seeing on an average, comparing to the pre-salt brine days, about a 50% reduction in salt. Again, even though our city is growing and that stuff, we're still able to keep those numbers down. Just kind of for numbers, when we first started, we went to about 23,000 gallons our first year. Last year, we did about 100,000 gallons of salt brine with our rock salt, and we're able to keep our last year, 2021. Granted, it wasn't a very strong year for snow totals. We still had quite a few operations that we did have to treat, and it was the least amount of salt that we had purchased since at least 2010 when I started, or 2011 when I started ordering rock salt. So it's been a substantial savings for us in that thing. We do other things with our salt brine that help us reduce our salt use in general with anti-icing. That's what you'll see where there's the white lines that are on the pavement prior to storms. Helps us, one, when we get underneath ½ inch of snow, it'll melt that ½ inch of snow before we have to come out and spread salt out. And then so also gives us a little bit more time to respond once that snow does start, ultimately increasing the safety for the commuters of the community. But we, again, we'll run that. We have 3 trucks that are capable of running that anti-icing or putting that material down before the storm. And then we've equipped every one of our trucks with tanks, onboard tanks, to use in conjunction with the rock salt. So we try to mix it in our augers. Kind of think about when your mom or your grandma used to make stuff for bake stuff for food, and they put everything in a mixer and it all came out in one ingredient. That's what we want to see. We mixed our salt brine right with our salt, so we want it to come out really pasty, and that stuff sticks. It's been very, very effective for us. And where we used to be, our trucks would go out and get 2 loads of salt to 1 load of brine. We're now going 2, sometimes 3 loads of salt to 1 load of brine. So we're substantially reducing that. Ultimately, that concentration level is not entering into our water areas and runoffs. Again, kind kind of quantities that we're putting out with that 100,000. I expect us to just go more in the future as we're exploring. We also do treat our steps and sidewalks, some of our steps when the weather's appropriate with this stuff to help us not have to use so much salt on them. When we do go shovel it, it comes off and it's a lot cleaner. Being able to deal with that has been a savings all around as well. Calibration is a really big thing for us that we do to also help reduce that salt. It has been substantial to make sure that we know exactly what we're putting out. So we calibrate every year in the spring or in the fall for sure, the beginning of the winter season. And then if time permits and we see some issues, we'll calibrate as needed throughout the season. Some of the next steps that we see going on is how we can better reduce our salt quantity, but be more effective at colder temperatures. Salt doesn't work that well, as most of you know, when it's cold. So anything that we can do to be more effective without high concentrations of chlorides and stuff like that is where we're going. But our community's been acceptable to allowing. We've been doing a lot more sanding of stuff when it is cold, especially below that 5 degrees below zero, 10 degrees below zero. We'll stop putting out as much salt and do more salt sand applications and that kind of thing. But overall, the community's adjusted well to that. So that is also done that, things for the community members that we see that we hope people will do and take action on is just because you put the salt out there doesn't mean you need it all. A lot of times, high concentrations of salt seem to react fast, but it doesn't dissolve at all. And then we sweep it off into our grass or it ends up in the springtime running down our storm drains. So for things, if your sidewalk's full of salt, after the storms and your sidewalk's clear, just as Allison and her team with Wisconsin Saltwise talk about, if you can sweep it up and it can be reused and help. So again, that's kind of a wrap of what we're doing. Seeing very, very dramatic decreases in salt use, which is ultimately going to improve, we feel, our salinity and that stuff into our rivers and streams, and not only a financial factor, but also an environmental factor that should help.
Thank you so much, Corey. And you've really done incredible work in your community. And as you talk about the public, being receptive to that, I did put into the chat the link to Eau Claire City Streets Twitter, because I feel like you've put a lot of work into working to educate and inform citizens, not only about road conditions, but also about why you're working to maintain the streets or, can't get to everything immediately. I think that's really important.
Definitely a collaborative effort. We can't do it alone. We need the community support and understanding in order to be a partnership on it.
Well, thank you so much. And with that, we'll turn it over to Matt.
All right. Thank you, Allison. And I just want to say thanks to everybody on the panel and everyone joining today. My name is Matt with Enviro Sealers. We operate out of Madison, Wisconsin, and then also our summer operations were in the Fox Valley area. This is just our second year offering winter maintenance, so we're pretty green to a lot of it, and no pun intended there. And last year was the first year, and we initially, what got us on board was we took the class. This made sense to us. And then we wanted to see what it would take to actually just get into a brine unit. Looking around locally at a lot of like supply companies that would normally supply some equipment, didn't necessarily have them on hand, and ordering some of the basic units seems to be a little bit of a risk for a smaller company. So we went ahead and basically just built our own brine applicator, and that grew into working with the City of Madison Sewer District and Saltwise, and we've actually now manufactured some of these brine boom applicators, and we're trying to make them available to the contractors that want to try it, but don't necessarily want to take the risk of the big investment right away. So this is an opportunity for them to get into it at a lower price point, taking away some of that risk. And then we also offer an opportunity to just rent the units on a monthly basis, and then form a co-op, since we're new at this, and there are contractors in the industry that have been doing it for a while, and they're willing to share their knowledge. So we just are trying to kind of bring everybody who's getting new and starting at it, the opportunity to get some lessons learned without having to do it the hard way, with talking about events both pre and post, as contractors are available. So that's really what we're doing. Is it just made sense to us to let's try and reduce the salt, and let's give it a shot. It continued to grow as the ideas kind of kept going. We also sell the brine to the contractors as well. So that's really what we're doing. And being that we're kind of into this just the second year, and didn't start with exclusively granulars prior to, we've been running a hybrid as we've been learning. I would say what I've seen, one of the best reductions, not only is the brine doing what Corey and Emil were talking about as far as the results and the quicker melt times and stuff and the reduction, it also just, sorry, I lost my train of thought. What I want to, I guess, emphasize is that if you're talking with your customers, they seem to be very open to, yeah, go ahead and try it. We haven't met much resistance, as long as the expectation is the quality of service remains high. And I think that if you are on the fence or somebody looking at it, just try it and just get into it slow, even doing your own parking lots or your own driveways, and then kind of getting familiar with it to take on bigger and maybe you exclusively go to a liquid treatment as much as you can. The pre-treatment has been the best success for us thus far. Granular afterwards is minimal to what we otherwise would have projected using just granular.
Thank you so much, Matt. And with that, we will turn it over to Katie.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Rodmacher, and I'm the Water Quality Manager with Milwaukee Riverkeeper. For those who aren't familiar, Milwaukee Riverkeeper is a science-based advocacy organization working for fishable, swimmable, and drinkable waters in the Milwaukee River Basin. And a little bit about our basin: it's nearly 900 square miles, and we're in southeastern Wisconsin. And the basin covers portions of 7 counties in our area, and is also home to 1.3 million people. All of our rivers meet in the city of Milwaukee before flowing into Lake Michigan. And about 70% of the people that live in the basin are getting their drinking water from Lake Michigan. So as has been discussed earlier this week and even earlier in this presentation, chloride is a permanent pollutant, and it's costly and difficult to remove from our freshwater supply. So hearing different groups working on lessening polluted runoff that's heading to our freshwater systems is just awesome to hear. So chloride is the key element in road salts and poses a threat to our rivers, our environment, our infrastructure, and then our drinking water. And so just quickly, water moves over the surface of the land, and it carries pollutants and other chemicals with it. And often in the winter, that's going to be excessive road salt and other de-icing chemicals. That'll either flow directly into our rivers, or it'll flow into the local storm drain that ultimately ends up in our rivers untreated. So that's kind of how road salts are getting their way into our local rivers. So in 2010, Milwaukee Riverkeeper began our road salt monitoring program. And our program uses community science. So volunteers are trained on how to collect pollution data And I always like to take a moment to say how grateful we are for our dedicated volunteers for all of our programs with Milwaukee Riverkeeper, but especially our road salt monitors who are going out there, after a storm when it's freezing cold to collect data. So yeah, they're critical to our programs. So what do road salt monitors do? So they mobilize after heavy snowfall events when we suspect that there's then heavy salting happening and there might be some chloride pollution happening in our rivers, or after a melting event. So when temperatures are warming up and snow is beginning to melt, that runoff is carrying those pollutants into our rivers. So the monitors head to their sites and they collect data on if the stream is experiencing a high conductivity level. So we use conductivity as an indicator of the potential chance that there is a chloride exceedance happening in the water. So if the chloride sensor that the volunteer is using says, yep, the chloride or the conductivity is high, the volunteer collects a water sample and we send those to the Wisconsin State Lab of Hygiene. And they are analyzed for the chloride concentration. So a really cool thing about our program is that all of the data that our volunteers collect and the analysis from the State Lab of Hygiene, all of that information is uploaded into the Wisconsin DNR's water quality database. And that data is used by state staff for listing threatened waterways as impaired, and then also used for other like management choices. So it's really awesome that our data is being used for management decisions. So a little bit about the Milwaukee River Basin and our chloride pollution. So 500 miles of the Milwaukee River Basin has 500 miles of perennial streams. And of those 500 miles, 108 miles are currently listed for chloride pollution. So that's significant. And this chloride pollution is listed as part of an impairment list that the state puts out every 2 years. So it's just important to note that our road salt monitors are out there identifying waterways that are reaching toxic chloride levels that otherwise wouldn't be monitored based on their efforts. So we know that the majority of our waterways in Milwaukee County are currently listed as impaired for chloride pollution. And it's, as you would suspect, it's more densely populated. We have more roads, more salting happening, more polluted runoff making its way into our rivers and streams. So in 2022, in the past 2 or 3 years, we've been really focusing our effort going to areas in Washington and Ozaki counties looking for any chloride contamination that may be happening. So yeah, we're exploring those areas now. And this year we have 23 volunteers that are monitoring 34 sites in those 2 counties. Yeah, and then I'm going to do a plug that if you're interested in monitoring with Milwaukee Riverkeeper, you should visit our website. We have a bunch of different monitoring opportunities. And otherwise, if you're interested in doing some community science in your area, but you don't live in southeastern Wisconsin, Water Action Volunteers has a lot of great water-based monitoring opportunities, or Isaac Walton League has some road salt monitoring opportunities as well. Otherwise, I will pass it back to Alice.
All right, thank you so much, Katie. And I did put into the chat links to the Milwaukee Riverkeeper Road Salt Monitoring Program, as well as the Isaac Walton League Salt Watch. So whether you're in the Milwaukee area or not, you can participate in citizen science monitoring of local streams or waterways. And we do have a few questions that have come in on the chat. So starting out from the top, Rick has a question about, and Emil, this is geared, looks like mostly towards you. Are you able to describe any work being coordinated by WisDOT to modify public behaviors, perceptions, to get the public to stay home during winter storm events to improve safety? So I don't know, Emil, maybe you could jump in. And Corey, if you have any suggestions either.
I think as far as coordinated through the department, I think our Office of Public Affairs has been doing a really good job through the social media, obviously, and then also through the 511. I think that's just really the main thing that that we have been really pushing it out there, because it contains so much information for the traveling public, and then as far as the decision of whether to go out or not. So I think those two are the ones that you should be seeking out, and everyone really, because they contain information, and that's really coming from all the information that we have, considering also the weather and also the the condition of the road. So
Thank you. I would jump in here and say that the partners that work to organize Wisconsin Salt Awareness Week are actually working on a draft letter to meteorologists that is kind of under review right now. So we're trying to use them and their platform to talk to the public a little bit more about, a storm's coming, maybe get your errands done now so you can, take it easy and stay inside. Give those plows plenty of room when the storm does hit. Looks like another question, Emil, for you. Someone was wondering if you misspoke when saying that you were using 9 tons of salt per lane mile.
Oh,
Can you explain it?
no. So I guess that's not application rate, but that's like that's the whole year. So basically what we're saying is that, here I have the actual numbers here. So our salt use last year is total throughout the state for the state highway system of 324,000 something tons. And then we have 35,000 something lane miles of state trunk highway. And then that means over the winter season of 2020 to 2021, we used 9.2 tons total per lane mile. So it's not application rate of each application, no. So.
Yeah, but it is a huge number, right? For
Yeah,
folks
yeah.
who aren't like in the business.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So just for a comparison, our numbers from the previous year is actually 12.2 tons per lane mile. So that's why this is so low, this last one. So that's just the difference between the two. So
Mm-hmm.
It really brings, Corey, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, Allison, just kind of to piggyback on his for some smaller numbers, in comparison to that, where, and I know locally some of our county municipalities are running similar application rates per se. So, when you think of a lane mile of road, we're running anywhere from 100 pounds, like to 300 pounds ish per lane mile. So you think of like, say 100 pounds, you go buy a 50-pound bag of salt, we're literally using 2 of those in an entire mile. To do that, or 300 much. So it's really, the numbers are really reducing for all of us in the past, both the state and for us, where we used to run at application rates in, like early 2000s at 300 to 600 pounds a lane mile. We're consistently running now in that 100 to 250, at least within the city, because we can add salt brine. So that's where we're also getting that big reduction. But, that can help, maybe clarify what he's discussing, on a smaller scale. So it's.
No, thank you, Corey. I think that's really helpful, right? Because when we think about, maybe a homeowner might buy multiple, right, 40-pound bags for their own, just their sidewalk and driveway. And to consider that for every 100 pounds per mile is just a couple of those bags. Yeah. A lot of great work definitely being done. And then let's see here. The next question, Corey, is for you. Wendy was asking, what would you say would be effective first steps to begin to shift public works attitudes towards salt usage?
I think on a public works side, I think a lot of it is capability and financing availability. That's where the hang up is for some smaller communities and that stuff. I really think a lot of them are trying to do to make improvements in salt reduction from the state level all the way down to the local small city that might only have 2,000 people in it. They are out there. I can assure you that I've never talked with the community that isn't aware of what's happening with their salt in ways that they can reduce. They're aware of ways that they can reduce it. Sometimes I think that the biggest challenge it becomes community education and acceptance of that. We want everything now. We're in Wisconsin, but we want bare pavement, and that can't happen if we're gonna. Our environment isn't sustainable at bare pavement rates in Wisconsin. So the public works side of things, I do think that I'm confident that they're aware of what's going on. It's the challenges educating the community and getting acceptance there. And it's an ongoing process. You know, programs like this, like you're putting on, Allison, and that stuff are foundational to changing that culture in the future. And I really see, you know, us being in a lot different place when I think of where we have been in the last 10 years to where we are now, and where I can see us going in the next 10. It's substantial. We're only going to get better. So I think it's more not necessarily confined to public works. I think it's a community educational thing.
I would jump in and say that Wisconsin Saltwise offers free training classes for both municipal staff, so DPW staff, as well as anyone involved in winter maintenance, from folks like Matt on the private contractor side to school districts, hospitals, etc. And we do have a couple classes coming up right now in February, and there is space available. So if you live in a community and you want to, you know, reach out and see if we can get your community's municipal staff trained, or at least a few of them, that's a great start. We also work to host equipment open houses across the state. So Corey was present at one in the Menominee area this last fall, and we're working to just bring people from different communities together to talk about, you know, what's working for them, where they're struggling, and then just kind of sharing best practices. So with that, we did have someone said, thanks for the clarification and all your time. I don't see any other questions right now, so we are a little over time. I thank all of you for staying on. Does anyone have any final words for the audience? Okay, so thanks again, all of you, for your time today and the incredible work that you're doing in each of your communities. And it really is, I think, like Corey said, we've come a long way in 10 years. The work that you're putting in, the synergies that are growing, it's just going to, I can sense great stuff is happening. So thank you all. Yeah.
Allison, it's important to, you know, it would be remiss if we didn't, you know, thank you for your efforts too, from the community side, on our side, even though we're a couple hundred miles away from you. It's the efforts here to do this educational stuff it helps us too. So we appreciate the work by groups like you guys.
Thank you, Corey. All right, we do have one question here that just came in from Mike. Let me read this. Any plans to educate and encourage the public to get the snow off before it gets packed down and let the sun do the melting? I don't know, Katie, do you want to jump in there at the idea of getting people to shovel first? What Milwaukee Riverkeeper is doing?
Sure. So we try to do a lot of, you know, education in our area too. We should say shovel early and shovel often, right? Because, you know, the sun can do that, but you don't want it to get cooler and then freeze also. But yeah, shovel early and shovel often, and then you might not even need road salt. And if you do use road salt, I know someone mentioned too, the importance of like sweeping it up after reusing is really important too.
Yeah, we're definitely trying to get that message out every time that I'm able to get on TV and the radio to share shovel first, shovel, scatter, switch, sweep it up. Yeah, but more voices sharing that just helps. So thanks again to all of you for your time today and your continued work. And I look forward to the rest of 2022.
Thank you, Allison.
Bye.